dangerous overcrowding and prolonged detentions. A DHS watchdog report is sounding the alarm on migrant conditions. A new, pretty shocking poll showing Biden taking a big drop and Kamala Harris coming up. Nike's Betsy Ross shoes are a no-go. And what is the fourth with barbecue, tanks, and armored vehicles?
That's America right there. Team Rising is here. Don Calloway is Democratic strategist, CEO of Pine Street Strategies. Chris Prudhome is a Republican strategist. He previously served as an advisor to the Ben Carson campaign. Welcome to you both, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
So we have a very interesting new poll out here showing a large drop for former Vice President Joe Biden. We have Kamala Harris, who's surged up to 20%, Elizabeth Warren at 14%, Bernie Sanders falling to 13%. One thing I'd love to talk with you both about is what explains Joe Biden's large drop amongst African American voters? His support evaporated overnight.
Yeah, he and Kamala are basically tied now, Don.
They are.
Yeah.
I mean, well,
in this poll, anyway.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I've always said that Joe Biden's large cachet was his proximity to our Lord and Savior Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. Once you start to dig into that, and once you start to pick apart the record of the segregationist senators that he spent a career buddying up with, and I understand why he did it. He is a Senate institutionalist. But once you start to pick into that, that does not have appeal to the modern African-American voter, and it shouldn't. So, once you get past the gospel brunches and fish fries, which are the staple of white politicians talking to black audiences, the substance is significantly objectionable. And I think that's what we're starting to see.
Chris, what do you think?
Well, I absolutely think Don is right. Look, I think I think his biggest issue right now is the anti-busing issue. I think it's just killed it. And Kamala actually going on during the debate, coming at him about it, I think it caused a lot of problems. So I think people looking at it, I've talked to people on both sides of the aisle, and they definitely question it and say, well, why did he go so hard, and why was he the leader of it so much? So it's hard to combat that.
Right.
And I think, like Don said, when you don't agree much on issues, but I agree with this. I mean, when you have President Obama, backing you up essentially the entire way, then all of a sudden, you have to distance yourself from that. He's alone. He's by himself now. Yeah. It becomes a big question mark.
Well, that is another great point, is that it's pretty notable that President Obama is not backing his 8-year vice president, who he said was the best decision he'd made, making him vice president. I also think the way that he handled that moment in the debate called into question not just whether his views fit with the modern party, but whether he was really agile enough to be able to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump, and whether he was really the most electable candidate. And that's the bottom line. Every Democrat, number one, first and foremost, wants to beat Donald Trump, and he did not look like the guy to do that.
Yeah, it wasn't his most vibrant moment on the national or global stage. He gave up time, and maybe it was just a really bad coincidence. But he said, "I'm sorry, my time is up," and you hope that that's not an aphorism for something much larger.
Right.
But however, I still think that Joe Biden represents a time in which he's a 75-year-old privileged white guy who is a generally good man. I don't mean to besmirch his character, but he's not used to being challenged toe-to-toe by a younger black woman. And it was a stark moment on the global stage about this is where we are in the Democratic Party. There is generational divides, and you won't see it any more clearer than you just did.
Well, one thing, Chris, I'd love to get your take on. This was from Michael Steele, who joined us earlier this week. He told us that he actually found the consensus among older African-American voters that Kamala Harris was being very unfair to Joe Biden. He said the general consensus with those he talked to was that she had done him wrong by going after him. Do you think could you explain why that sentiment might exist?
Well, so I think people kind of expect a certain level of respect, so to speak, being that he is Joe Biden. And I think, look, even I was shocked. I mean, I think she did come a little hard at Joe Biden, and I think him being the front runner and him being the person, so to speak, to lead the party, I guess, in this regard, it was definitely a shock. And I think she did come a little hard at him, and I was shocked myself.
Right.
I think she certainly is in the race to win it, and I was very much surprised that this early in the stage that she came on. I think that right now she is coming out with the gloves off all out, and I think that's what her motive is.
Don,
you
is
heard that at all?
Yeah.
I've heard that, but those people can sit down somewhere. The world has moved past them. Let's be very clear about this. Kamala Harris is not an old woman, and she integrated her school. This is not ancient history.
Right.
There's a generation like myself for whom busing saved our lives. My friends and I who made it out of North St. Louis, busing saved our blanking lives. That's not conjecture or some type of political voodoo. That's a fact. And Joe Biden was against it.
Yeah.
he was against one of the major anti-segregation, major generational poverty reduction initiatives of the life of this country. And that's something that he should have to stand for. And if Kamala Harris stands in toe-to-toe and asks him about that in a respectful way, she didn't yell, she didn't curse him out, that's something that he should have to stand for. This idea that Joe Biden or anybody else is above being challenged on their substantive record and real merits is just beyond me, and it reeks of entitlement.
I couldn't agree with you.
Well, I don't think it's so much about being challenged. I think, and I talked to another commentator friend of mine the other day about this, I think Democrats have to look at themselves and say, okay, get past our drama and our issues, and they have to look at who is the best candidate to beat President Trump. That's what they should look at. That's it.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that she's the one to absolutely do it.
Huh. Interesting.
Well,
I mean, it's a hard question. That whole electability thing is
so
like
difficult,
so subjective and hard to know.
Nobody looked at Trump in 2015.
We're like,
and said, yeah,
electable.
that's
No
the
one looked at
electoral
Barack
guy.
Obama and
That's
said
right.
electable. They said, we like this guy and we're going to take a chance on him.
That's exactly
Hillary
right.
Clinton, opposite. They said that's the electable one. Didn't work out so well.
Speaking of contentious issues on race, we have the Betsy Ross Nike sneakers were discontinued by Nike. Basically, Nike created these, might I say so for myself, awesome sneakers, which I totally would. I would purchase these in a heartbeat. I mean, just look at these things. It's beautiful. So they have the Betsy Ross flag, which of course was a flag that was stitched in during the American Revolution, a symbol of American resistance to the British. Colin Kaepernick, who is a Nike representative himself, contacted the company. He said that they are offensive because they remind of the area of slavery, given that this was in the early 1700s. Don, what do you think about this?
First of all, I think it's a great shoe. The Air Max 90s are classic, hidden swoosh and everything. Fantastic shoe.
Totally.
But, I'm all for not celebrating or not elevating, not lifting up something that represents an era of this country that did not include everybody.
But that goes to the question. Is everything pre-1865 just erased? We cannot live in this.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, and frankly, I'm sure that Nike agonized over it a little bit. But and Colin Kaepernick has a voice. But I would also raise the idea that the NAACP and multiple organizations have spoken out against the Betsy Ross flag for years and years prior to just this. So Colin Kaepernick
is often used by white nationalist groups. That's a fair
and I think that's part of it. It's been co-opted by white nationalists, which is part of their objection.
Yeah.
But again, I think big picture, big principle is that let's stop lifting up stuff that represents a time when all of us were not included. Because 4 out of the 4 of us were not allowed to participate in the America under Betsy Ross's flag. All 4 of us sitting at this table.
That's fair.
This is not conjecture.
Chris, what do you think?
Well, my thing is this: when does sensitivity become too much? I mean, I completely understand. I did a segment recently on another network regarding the third stanza in the national anthem. So look, I think we have to look at ourselves and say, look, we just can't throw everything that comes with America away.
Yeah.
And look, and I think as far as Nike go, we should allow the consumers to determine who's the winner and who's the loser with their dollars. Let them vote by their dollars, and we can determine,
But I think so far, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but so far, when they have taken stands in terms of civil rights and social justice, consumers have rewarded them, haven't they, Don?
There's a lot of very rich people in San Francisco.
They have. I mean, Nike stock spiked. Nike stock spiked after the Colin Kaepernick campaign, which, some folks burned their stuff and, hey.
Yeah, that's dumb. Look, I like Nike. I'll continue wearing it. I really just think it goes to the central question. Ta-Nehisi Coates said this. He goes, it's as much a part of our history that people put up those Confederate statues as the fact that we fought the Civil War and we reclaimed and we ended slavery in the first place. I think there's a lot of something to that. There's something to that of recognizing our symbols as, yes, white identitarians may use this as part of their symbol, but that doesn't mean we surrender a symbol of, yes, were things flawed in the colonial era? Absolutely, you're right. 4 out of 4 of us would not have been able to participate. But the spirit of that is what the country is all about. And I feel like moving that forward is something that we shouldn't cede to the nastiest parts of our electorate.
And more importantly, we moved on from that.
Yes.
And
I think it's amazing. Look at this show. There are 4 of us here. We're sitting here. We're discussing this. That's great, right?
Absolutely.
Still got a lot of work to do.
The beauty of America is that we all have the freedom to continue to challenge America. The great James Baldwin says, I love America enough to challenge her to be her best self, to live up to the promises that she included in her founding documents. And I don't really have any sympathy or space for the times that we lift up of some halcyon era, because it wasn't a halcyon era for anybody here, literally for none of us. So any part of this country that did not allow certain folks to live up to their full potential and humanity and affirm their full humanity, I don't think it should be a part of our discussion going forward.
All right, guys, we got more we want to get to with you. Stick around. We'll be right back.